Welcome to this special edition of Flashpoints. I'm Andy Triay, and joining me is our Chief National Security Analyst, Juan Zarate. Juan, thanks for joining us. Let's get right to it. The escalating threat of Al-Qaeda in Yemen.
Yeah, what we've seen, Andy, with this cargo plot is Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, the Al-Qaeda branch in Yemen, trying to evade the scrutiny and screening that we have in place to protect the country and trying something innovative, putting 2 bombs on cargo headed to the United States. Authorities now think those were set with timing devices likely to go off at some point in mid-shipment when the cargo aircraft was in air, or perhaps even a civilian aircraft carrying the packages would be in midair. But it's clear this was a serious plot intended to do great harm. And fortunately, we had good intelligence, thanks to cooperation with the Saudi government, that allowed us to actually pinpoint where those packages were and ultimately to defuse them.
And this is not a one-off from what we call AQAP, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. Last December, they tried to blow up an airliner, a civilian airliner over Detroit.
Absolutely. The problem with Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula is that this is the most active of the Al-Qaeda affiliates out there, led by hardened Al-Qaeda types with deep ties with bin Laden. Back in February 2006, 23 of them made probably the most important jailbreak in the post-9/11 terrorist context, when 23 of them escaped, including the current leader, Nasser al-Waishi of this group.
Right.
And it was at that moment that they began to reconstitute, along with others coming from Saudi Arabia, to reconstitute this group, which they announced in January of 2009. Now what's happening is this group is not only causing problems in Yemen with assassinations, oil pipeline disruptions and such, and assassination attempts in Saudi Arabia, but they are also now serving as what I call a lily pad or strategic outpost to try to hit the United States. We saw it on December 25th with Abdul Muttalib, the failed Detroit
the underwear bomber.
The underwear bomber. We've seen it now here, and authorities now are really worried that this has now become an alternate platform for Al-Qaeda to try to hit the United States.
And making this interesting is near the top of the leadership structure of AQAP is an American.
Absolutely. You have Anwar al-Awlaki, now I think well known to many Americans, the Yemeni-American cleric who has, in my opinion, served as a siren song for recruits, bringing Westerners into this group. And he's also served as a strategic and operational voice for Al-Qaeda. And so I think he's helping with the external operations, thinking through how to throw us into chaos. And I think in some ways what this group is doing is they're not planning for the spectacular attacks. They'll take that if they can get it.
Right.
But what they're trying to do is foment chaos. And so they're going for disruption, perhaps, versus destruction. So in some ways they see this, even though these bombs didn't go off, even though they didn't kill anybody, they probably see this as a victory because it's causing a lot of angst, causing us to throw resources at the problem, causing us to quarantine Yemen in some ways. Shipments now are quarantined out of Yemen into Europe and into the United States. And so this is a different model in part, and it's driven by some of these Americans. There's another American there named Samir Khan, who's helping with their online journal called Inspire, which we've seen 2 editions of.
Right.
And so
an online English language magazine, an Al-Qaeda magazine on the internet.
Exactly, and all intended to sort of throw spaghetti at the wall, see if people will be inspired to take action on their own. It's what al-Awlaki has talked about now. And it's unfortunately a problematic trend. The other thing I would say, Andy, is this is a really professional and deep Al-Qaeda group. They've got a Saudi bomb maker, al-Asiri, who is responsible not just for these package bombs, but the December 25th underwear bomb, as well as the attempted assassination of Mohammed bin Nayef, the Saudi counterterrorism chief, last August.
All bombs that were not detected by conventional means.
Not detected, and they're getting better at trying to evade our screening. The good news is, Andy, they know we have screening in place, and so they have to try to evade it in some fairly technically difficult ways, in ways that make it less likely that the devices are going to work, like we saw on December 25th.
And it was a year ago today that that Major Hassan killed 13 people at Fort Hood in Texas. He was inspired by Anwar al-Awlaki.
That's right. What we learned later was that he had email communications with Anwar al-Awlaki. He had searched out al-Awlaki, sent his emails, and al-Awlaki had responded a couple times. But al-Awlaki is a known figure in the jihadi world. He's had cassette tapes out there. He's been on the internet, and he really has been a siren song for this jihadi movement, now driven in part out of Yemen.
And YouTube a couple of days ago pulled his videos from the YouTube world, but they're still out on the internet.
That's right.
The European plot, the plot that we read about and covered a couple months ago on hitting European targets, is this related at all to the cargo bombs, to AQAP or Al-Qaeda in general?
It's not related directly, but it is related in that both come from Al-Qaeda or branches of Al-Qaeda. And I think it's a great question, Andy, because I think we tend to thrash in the media and in the public and even in government from one threat to the next based on the most recent plot. And we tend to forget that these...
How did that package get on that plane? And
yeah,
we're all
and we're focused on that. We're not remembering that just a couple weeks ago we were all focused on the travel alert and the problems of an Al-Qaeda core, bin Laden-driven plot to hit Europe. And the reality is that plot is still potentially out there. Authorities are worried that Al-Qaeda, which has invested in that plot, has sent operatives into Europe to hit with assault teams, like we saw in Mumbai, to hit multiple cities at once in a spectacular attack. That threat is still out there, and so authorities have a really complicated job because they've got to worry not just about the packages coming out of Yemen or some new innovation coming out of there, but also the core Al-Qaeda trying to commit a spectacular attack in the heart of Europe.
All right, so now you've got core Al-Qaeda holed up on the Afghan-Pakistan border, and we're hitting them pretty hard. But now you have other outposts of Iraq, of Al-Qaeda popping up around the world.
Yeah. Well, the way I describe it, Andy, and easiest for me to think about it, it's a kind of a terrorist hydra. I mean, you've got the core of it in Afghanistan, Pakistan, led by bin Laden and Zawahiri. But then you have these regional affiliates with varying degrees of expertise and ability to operate. But the main one being in Yemen, where you've got these hardened fighters, these Saudi Yemenis drawing Westerners, who are then not only fomenting problems and causing attacks in the region, but trying to hit the West. You've got groups like Al-Shabaab, a militant group in Somalia, with ideological ties to Al-Qaeda and growing ties to this group in Yemen. You've got the group in North Africa, Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, that's holding French hostages, for example. We've talked about that a lot on Flashpoints. So you've got these outposts and other groups in Central Asia, other parts of the world that subscribe to the ideology of Al-Qaeda, in some ways have been ingrained with this global jihadi DNA. That is, we have to hit the West. We've got to try to attack the United States and Europe. And that makes the job of counterterrorism officials much more difficult because it's not just watching what comes out of Pakistan or Afghanistan, it's what's coming out of Yemen, Somalia, North Africa, Central Asia, and Europe.
All right. Thank you, Juan.
Thank you, Andy.